So we are looking at various kinds of examples. We looked at the orchestration in SMEs. So where we have saw that there is the interaction with various participants in the supply chain, and how this helps. Let us look at the logistics. That is what is called B2B Logistics Chain. So what is B2B logistics? It is business to business logistics. Logistics network with several companies coming together to offer service delivery. In other words, there are several suppliers, and the suppliers basically have to transfer or to have to supply to some manufacturer, and not only one supplier, but several suppliers, and also each supplier may supply to several manufacturers same component. So there is a multiple this one, and they are all modular with modular organization structure. In other words, if you look at the logistics chain, there are the warehouses. They may be owned by somebody else, and the ownership is different. And there are truck companies. They may be owned by a Ford or Toyota or whatever. They could be different owners. And similarly, the other things, so other services that are needed are all owned by different people. So they're all modular with modular organization structure. The service network is formed for each order from the collection of 2 PLs or 3 PLs. Supposing somebody wants to transfer, one company, auto company wants to transfer some components from somewhere in the United States to Detroit, where this is done, or from in India, from say Pune to Gurgaon in near Delhi. So this, what is that at that time? There is no fixed players in this. So you have a collection of people, and from that collection you select the truck drivers, you select the warehouse places, you select the trucks, and so on, and basically you form a network for each of these orders, and each delivery is monitored for quality, time, and damage, etc. And planning of the resources and their maintenance is done by a coordinator called the 4PL. 4PL is fourth party logistics for players. He is asset free. In other words, he is like an orchestrator. He doesn't own any assets, but he just manages. He is responsible for the delivery, but he doesn't own any assets. So the execution of each delivery is monitored. So if you look at B2B logistics, redesign using cloud, if you look at the diagram, say there is a seller, there is a buyer, and this is the chain of events that usually happen for an international logistics chain. You put them in a warehouse, and afterwards they are forwarded from the warehouse for the customs clearance, and they go through either airline shipping, this is the international travel, and there is custom clearance at the other end, the freight forwarding, and then to the warehouse and of the buyer. So from warehouse to warehouse, there are a chain of players that are there. Now here, there are several of these players. Now what is their information systems? How are they connected? You can have, each of them have their own information systems. And they're all connected by a communication network. But they may be, in other words, for example, this warehouse may be using Manhattan Associates warehouse. This can be Oracle, this one. And the airline shippers may not be using, the customs clearance may be using some other software and all that. What happens in that particular case is that the information systems, either they can communicate, but their interfaces become some difficult. So what you could do, if you want to have an orchestrator on this, you can have a cloud network which is connecting all this. So you can reconstruct all this, and it is already happening nowadays. There are companies which are doing, in other words, trying to put everything on cloud, have all the data on this, put all the players on this cloud, and you can have e-capacity, e-inventory, e-visibility in all this. So using cloud and big data, you could do a lot of machine learning algorithms, you could do a lot of analysis that happens in this. One of the things that you could do, usually supposing you are sending the seller is sending something to a buyer somewhere, and if he is doing it frequently, then it's not necessarily to go through the optimization route to find what is the best route, who are the players and all that. You have all the data here. So you can mine that data and find out what is the best route, who are the best players, and if you have to hire 2 or 3 players across this, I mean some people in this, some people in this leg, then what is the relationship between the players and this, so that they collaborate and your job is done in a more cooperative way, rather than if they don't know each other, then there could be problems of this. So here a collaborative network can be formed with all the data using the cloud and the others, this one. So the B2B chain can be used using cloud and big data. You can orchestrate on this. Now that is about the B2B logistics chain. Now let's look at another logistics chain, which is that happens in emerging markets like in India. Now the logistics industry, basically it moved from a function of under the procurement or sales management to end-to-end goods movement to modular clusters or stacks populated by specialist firms and infrastructure authorities. So the industry stack divides activities into layers that are complementary to each other as depicted in the figure. I'll show you that figure. Yes. So what does logistics mean? What is the logistics? This one. Let us look at the figure and come back to this slide. Now, if you look at this figure, there is the infrastructure players, which are ports, airports, rail, road freight, logistics hub, free trade zones, and all that. The second players in this are carriers like ships, aircrafts, wagons, trucks, cranes, moving equipment, and so on. Now, these two are the asset incentive things. In infrastructure, I didn't put the warehouses here. Storage is container freight stations, warehouse, transportation hubs, supply hubs, and distribution centers, and all that. So this is also an asset intensive, and you have a lot of software packages available for managing this. For example, WMS is warehouse management system, TMS is transportation management system. For trade facilitation is in the ports, particularly GPS, global positioning systems, RFID, radio frequency identification. So all these are the software packages that are available. And you have service providers who are 3PLs, third-party logistics players. They are clearing agents who does this. They are customs authorities. They are trucking companies who supply the trucks, and they are auditors and call centers. Now, who are the people who basically are the ones who are the bosses here? That is the OEMs, the 4PLs, consultants, software providers, BPO providers, and also the regulators. So, in other words, if you look at this particular diagram, it shows you that there are 6 layers of people. If you want, you can make more layers out of this, which are, some of them are infrastructure, they provide the trucks and the storage, software and service, and they are regulators. These are the ones. Now, in a country like India, what happens is, you have no big players. In other words, if you want to move some material from another, there are only people who are truck owners, who own 1 or 2 trucks or 4 or 5 trucks. There could be million of such small players. Now, if you want to move some material from one place to the other, how do you do it in this splintered atmosphere? That's the problem that we are discussing here. In this splintered atmosphere, with no scale and big industry push, the best model for Indian logistics is orchestration. So, each of these components layered upon below or other and communicates through more or less standard interfaces. How do these people communicate with each other? Is there any communication at all? If they communicate, it is standard by letters or by phone or by fax and so or by post. So, how do you make things work in such a this? An orchestrator can connect all the players to plan and execute logistics functions. So, it is important to realize, I'm not saying this kind of layered architecture for logistics is only in India. It is the layered architecture for logistics in any country. But how efficient of each and how efficient is the interconnection between them, communication between them, collaboration between them. So, an orchestrator can connect all the players to plan and execute the logistics functions. So, if you are sending this one from one place to the other, and you choose 3PL clearing agents, and they will put it in some warehouse, and from there it will go to a port, from that port to another port here, and it goes to this warehouse and through another clearing agent, and it will go to the particular owner, whoever it is. So, if you go through this whole thing, your product may go through several of these players like that. So, for that, you have to require an orchestrator to connect all the players and plan for this. So, for that, what is the business model that we have? It's like a similar diagram you can have here. For example, you have a customer who has the orders to the logistics provider to transport from the supplier to the contract manufacturer to the customer. So, let's look at what is the diagram here. So, there once he receives the order, there is the operational status is found out, then there are the plans are given and the material actually flows through this and the payment is done. So, this suppliers to 2PLs and so on, when we say this, there is in between here is the ports and warehouses and others. And similarly, in between are the ports and warehouses in all these places. So, your material actually moves from all the layers, and this planning, coordination and overall responsibility is being taken by lead logistics player or 4PL. That's the kind of business model that is followed, and there are lots of companies in practice which does this kind of thing. But what happens is, what is the kind of this, as I have shown, if you use cloud computing here, store all this information in a cloud, and if everybody has access to the cloud in this, and if you can use some machine learning techniques, then you can design algorithms which makes this business a lot more. So, what is happening with all the advancement of these technologies in global supply chain is it's becoming more and more technology intensive, and cloud computing and big data are entering into the logistics scenario. So, there is finally the 4PLs also do the execution. They provide the end-to-end B2B logistics services They coordinate all the services needed for the good transfer, like warehousing at the shipper and distributor ends, arrange for trucks all through the journey, manage the custom clearance at ports, loading and unloading, cross-docking, merchant transit as required, and manage all exceptions through a control room, truck failure, truck registration, payment at customs, driver schedules, expediting, etc. So, if you look at these functions of the execution, this is all what the logistics provider, the fourth party logistics provider or LLP will do. And the LLP provides value added services to customers, supports or manages the production of multiple suppliers, coordinates their activities, assumes the responsibility for the logistics and the management of collaborative relations in the network, and aligns the participants' objectives with those of the complete chain. This is the point that is important, that all the participants, their objectives should be aligned along with the complete chain. So, everybody should feel responsible to get the things on time at the proper places. I think there is one example of this. There is a company called Penske in the United States, and what Penske does is it will lease vehicles from companies like Toyota, Ford, and so on, and it will provide transport services. It will provide services, trucking services for auto components for various manufacturers who are based out of Detroit. So, this is basically a United States operation. So, the components, the trucks move from some city in the United States to basically Detroit. So, how do you, what Penske Logistics does one thing, and that is the execution of this. There is a planning that it does, and the planning depends on sophisticated MIP models, integer programming models. But in addition, it also does the execution. So, the BPO workers, particularly from Genpact, business process outsourcing workers in India and Mexico, they arrange for titles and registration of the trucks licensed by Genpact in the United States. In other words, they are basically Genpact, the trucks leased by Penske in the United States, check the customer credit status, arrange for all necessary documents. If the truck gets stuck at a weigh station, failing to fulfill some permits, the truck driver would call an 800 number and the BPO staff transmits necessary documentation to the weigh station, and the truck would be on the road within half an hour. So, what happens in all this is that there is continuous monitoring of the truck travel by the BPO here. Now, you should understand one thing, that there is not one truck from one place to another. There are several thousands of trucks which are traveling all over the United States, and for Penske Logistics, for example, during a day, there could be several 1,000 trucks which are taking goods from one place to the other in the United States, and that basically all the trucks have to be monitored and all exceptions are to be addressed. That's the point. So, this kind of thing, if this facility of addressing is not available and if a truck fails, it will remain on the road, and it is up to the driver to get it repaired and then go ahead. So, basically the issue is that there is the company, the Genpact acts as the orchestrator on behalf of Penske Logistics, or you can call Penske Logistics itself as an orchestrator, which uses Genpact services to monitor the delivery of the auto components from all places in the United States to Detroit. So after the trip, driver's log will be shipped to Genpact facility in Mexico, and where mileage, tax, toll, and fuel are punched into Penske computers and then processed in India. So this is how the execution takes place. This is a practical example of today. Genpact manages the logistics services of Penske, such as just-in-time delivery of components to US factories and shipping final goods to retailers and home consumers. So that's the importance of the logistics, this one. So let's look at two other examples. And these examples are important because they have an Indian context. One is a Mandi, which is an orchestrator in Indian agriculture markets. Now, there is what is called APMC Act, Agriculture Act, which actually prohibits the farmers directly selling to the retailers, or the retailers directly procuring from the retailers. In other words, this is about our agriculture, whether it is fruits, vegetables, and so on. So the retailers in India cannot directly buy it from the farmers. I mean, the reason is that the government is worried that the farmers who are small farmers, who are 2-3 acre owners, they may be vandalized by the big players of the mandis, the international players. So for that reason, the government has created a place called Mandi. That's an intermediary where the farmers go to the Mandi and then they sell their produce there, and they basically, the retailers come there and the transactions happen. So what is the Mandi? Mandi in India, wholesale trade of agriculture products happens through mandis. Trade outside is not permitted. Mandis are established under the Agriculture Product Marketing Committee Act, APMC Act, to help small farmers get fair price and protect them from the traders. Governments have established 7,000 mandis in India. And each mandi has a lot of real estate. These are mandis are there in big cities as well as in small cities. So in big cities there is huge space that is reserved for these mandis. And farmers bring agriculture produce to mandis where it is auctioned and sold to traders or to commission agents. In classical open cry ascending price auction is the format used. In other words, the open cry, in other words, all the players are there at one place and somebody manages this one, and each people shouting this one. It's an ascending auction. That is, if somebody says some price, then the next cry is going to be more than what it is, and so on. The highest bidder wins the vote. Traders later sell to wholesalers, retailers, and companies. So here, if you look at this Mandi market area, the idea is that there are two problems associated with this. One is the mandis are there, 7,000 mandis, but India is a large country. So all the farmers may not be able to bring their produce to the mandi. Although mandis have very good facilities for stay and so on, overnight stay and all that, but still, people have to haul their goods over the time. And the second thing is that here the open cry auction takes place, and is it possible to do all this over internet? That's the idea that is. And also mandis is just a meeting place, and the mandis won't do as an orchestrator. So what we are trying to look at here is, can the mandi be an orchestrator? In other words, supposing there is a demand in the market for tomatoes or potatoes or whatever. Is it possible for the Mandi to tell the potato farmers and ask them to get to the Mandi these potatoes or something? Or for example, there is a cotton requirement somewhere in Mumbai, and is that information transmitted to the Mandis all over the country, and the Mandis buy it and transmit it to the requirements, and so basically there is a supply from the farmers and there is a demand both at the retailers, at the factory level and so on, depending on the commodity that we are talking about. Now Mandis currently are acting as a place where, it's a meeting place, it's nothing else. So can it become a more proactive orchestrator where it knows what are the requirements of various players in the country and which farmers are producing this, and connect both of them. So that's the issue that we are talking. So social network of the Mandi here is, you have a traditional Mandi, and you have the players include, there are the farmers, then these are the farmers, and there are commission agents. You have the commission agents, Cs and Cs, and industries, retailers, wholesalers, consumers, and APMC, Mandi staff, and so on. So this becomes a big social network, not a big one for this, but if you take a particular product like coffee or rice or potatoes or onions, then you can probably get more focused social network. And these are disparate groups with no ties. What is happening here is these farmers have no ties at all, but they come to the traditional mine, and this is only the tie is in terms of just coming there and so on. There is no connection of or transactions that takes place. Structural holes exist between these communities. In other words, you have the farmers as a community, and that's a network of themselves, and there are the traders, there are the retailers and all that. That is another community, and this Mandi only connecting point between them, otherwise they are not connected. So Mandi basically is an orchestrator which fills the structural hole. What is a structural hole? Structural hole is between two communities. If there is no communication, then there is a hole there in terms of communication, and an orchestrator is the one that fills these particular kinds of holes, and Mandi is supposed to fill in the holes through interfaces, collaboration and so on. So now here, if you are doing the supply demand matching, in other words, whatever that cotton is needed in some place, cotton is produced by farmers some other place. Is it possible to connect both of them so that you have the so-called supply demand matching that happens? And what is the farmer's dilemma? The farmer's dilemma is where and when to sell the produce. Sell to the village trader or commission agent. Sell to the village trader or commission agent, or sell at the Mandi. If you want to sell at the Mandi, then you have to travel to the nearest Mandi or another in city. Mandi is far off, long wait for auction date and middleman interference. And at the end it may not buy. So you have a decision tree where you basically can find out whether you want to sell depending on the probabilities here. So how do we analyze this one? Current agriculture network has structural holes. The farmers, who are the sellers, and the consumers, buyers, are not allowed to buy sell directly with each other and are forced to transact via the Mandi. Now the trader monopoly exists. In the Mandi system, traders have high bargaining power. Traders can form a cartel and inhibit the ascending price auction from taking place. It's a usual problem. And the supply-demand mismatching. Farmers do not follow demand-driven crop cultivation. Follow neighbors or past history. And contract farming is not popular. So, for a variety of reasons, they said they were this one. And Mandi is an electronic exchange. Transform current Mandi into an electronic marketplace. And farmers can directly sell their produce online to the consumer. Brokers, retailers, breaking the monopoly of the middleman. So why do you have to come? In other words, you can make Mandi an electronic exchange and connect to the farmers to this. You need to have the physical exchange. The Mandi exchange will also provide latest marketplace of all the crops and minimum support price. This is, Mandi does even that right now. Access to financial services, provide real-time weather, seeds, fertilizers, information, and fills the structural holes by connecting farmers, quality control, transporters, and consumers. So if this is done, now currently there is a Mandi, there is an infrastructure that's available, but the only thing is just used as a meeting place. So I think it requires some effort to connect this Mandi into an electronic exchange, and where people can connect, and it will be to the benefit of the farmers. The big reason is the intermediaries are so powerful. The farmer usually gets only 20% of the final price the consumer pays. So the consumer pays, say, $100, the farmer gets only $20 of that, and there is a lot of food wastage and all that. So, lot of the ills of the agriculture supply chain can be treated by making the Mandi an electronic exchange. Follows the path of Safal. There are some private players like Amul, which does in this, and Safal and other cooperatives. The success of the Mandi acts as an orchestrator and connects all the stakeholders in the agriculture supply chain, estimates the demand for each commodity, and advises the farmers how many acres of cultivation is required for every year. Now currently, how do farmers produce whatever they are producing? They produce this by whatever neighbors are doing, whatever their grandfathers did. So they don't have any estimate of what is the market need. Act as an enabler for farmers to become socially connected, and help farmers establish cooperatives like Amul and do value addition. So there is a lot that if Mandi now transforms itself as an orchestrator, there is a lot of benefit to this one. So what we are basically saying is that it's important people look at these governance models and transform the currently operating enterprises, operating intermediaries or traders into orchestrators who are basically more useful. So I'll very briefly look at orchestrating a print supply chain. So what is a print supply chain? Suppose you have a bank, and the banks basically require a lot of printed ones. Supposing most of them do online transactions, but if you want to, you have to fill in, if you want to take a loan, auto loan or a house loan, then you have to fill in some forms, get your signatures and so on, and these forms have to be basically saved somewhere. And these forms, and similarly you have to send credit card statements, you have to basically fill in the forms if you want to deposit a check, withdraw cash, and so on. So there are several forms that are needed. And now, how are these forms printed in a place like in India? These are basically, if a bank has 4,000, 5,000 branches, and it costs like 400 to 500 crores per annum. So basically, these are all heavy heavy items that this one. What the bank typically does is the stationery department, it has paper mills and ink, and they bring all this stationery and warehouse it is in some place. And there are the print locations. And this particularly the stationery that is needed could be forms, it could be envelopes, it could be brochures, whatever is needed, but they need to be printed somewhere. And this is a small player phenomena, but there are 5,000 branches. So one thing is to print these brochures, these forms, these loan application forms, car loan application, house loan, and the ink that is used is different, because if it is house loan, it has to stay there for 30 years, 40 years. And if it is car loan, it has to be stable for 10 to 15 years. So basically there are quality issues that are there, and the branches are located all over India. The branches, bank branches are located all over India. So these are all the bank branches that are there, and whatever stationery is there, it has to be printed and it has to be sent to this one. Now there could be some specialization or customization that may happen in the printing, because India has 28 states and each state has a different language that speaks, native language. So usually what the bank do is they have English on one side and the native language on the other side. So there is depending on where the branch is, which state the branch is, it is basically, it may depend on that. So there is some customization in terms of the printing that is needed. But all the content, everything has to be legal, because it has to be permission, and there is a central headquarters that decides all this. So what is the problem here? The problem is that these branches require the stationery. One thing is they can have small printer and print it for print that themselves, and they do it that. But sometimes what the bank wants is, they can supply the PDF files and they can print it and use that. But most banks have printed forms centrally printed, and they are sent by courier to the bank branches. Imagine these bank branches are 5,000 of them, and so what you have is, once the branches fill this, then some of this outbound sorting and bundling into pin codes and courier and distribution, finally part to the customers, partly to the headquarters branch, and so on to the customer care. Supposing there is a house loan form, and that form has to go to the headquarters, and any other forms have to go. And for example, credit card bills or the bank account statements have to be mailed to the customers from the branches afterwards. So if you look at the entire print supply chain, there is you take the white paper and then print it and send it to the branches, customer fills in, or the bank branch fills in the account statements, and then it goes back. So there are several players who are there in this particular thing, and we looked at this one because it costs, if you're a bank, it is a huge expenditure. So you can write down the ecosystem for this, but because of time, this one, and you can orchestrate the entire this one. That there is an orchestrator, which usually it can be the bank, it can be somebody else, and there are the print supplier, courier providers, and it goes to all the branches and so on. Now, whatever each branch requires is told to the printer, print service, and so on, and finally it goes back. So you can have a print supply chain governance model that manages the entire thing. In other words, there is manager printers, manager courier services, and bank branch interface. You can have this. So the point here is this: why is there a need for an orchestrator? there is a need for an orchestrator because the banks are huge. It has several branches in various states, and there is the print, this one that is required. Online is possible, but it is not frequently used. So, and people require this printing, this one they have to use manually, handwrite and fill these particular forms. So that's where an orchestrator is needed to save this one. Of course, this kind of thing may be, for example, as in the case of income tax filing, the government may say you can file if you have to do e-filing or something, and then those kind of technology changes may change this print supply chain. But currently the print supply chain needs an orchestrator to save a lot of money. This otherwise, banks always, bank branches complain that they are not having the proper this one. They have to use Xerox, the world forms and all that kind of thing. So mapping the print supply chain, finding strategic printer partners and so on is an issue, and connections with stakeholders and interconnecting them through personal and business relationships are the soft skills that are needed. So I think so far what we have been doing is I have given you several examples from airlines to contractors, and particularly in the Indian context, the print supply chain, the Mandis and so on, which are very important. And people have to properly analyze these and do the appropriate analysis. One thing which is a very important topic is, what is an orchestration? Orchestrator is basically, he doesn't own anything, he just manages. And there is a possibility that most of these manufacturers become orchestrators, because a manufacturer, instead of doing everything himself, he outsources the manufacturing, he outsources the logistics, he outsources the distribution, everything, and he just becomes a manager of this orchestration. So are there any risks of this? In other words, when you outsource manufacturing, is there a risk of you losing out something? You certainly lose the intellectual property. As I told you in the risks chapter, that there are lots of companies who became big by stealing the intellectual property. So there is a risk of this. So is it possible to look at what are the risks here in this? Orchestration is a high risk model. There is no doubt about that. The orchestrating company mobilizes needed assets of other companies to support its own growth initiatives. Right? So once a company has chosen to orchestrate, it's difficult, though not impossible, to go back and reintegrate. What I'm saying here is that if you are a manufacturing company, you just want to outsource everything, your manufacturing, design, everything, and then you become an orchestrator. Then can you go back and reintegrate? No. But if you have started as a orchestrator, if you have started as a 4PL and so on, is it possible for you to get into the manufacturing and all that? So let's look at, here is the story of a company called Schwinn, the iconic American bicycle manufacturer, allowed to orchestrate to haul out its core. Let's look at this example. The story is this. Schwinn owned about 20% of US market. This is a bicycle market, and produced hundreds of thousands of bikes a year in 5 factories. It was bicycle that all American children dreamed of owning, and Schwinn stood for cutting edge innovation and unmatched quality. Right? So that is the company that it has. And its management felt that company's legacy of innovation and customer relationships were the most valuable assets, and they outsourced production to a small supplier in Taiwan, Giant Manufacturing Corporation. So here comes the question of the core competency theory. Now, as I showed you last time, infrastructure, customer relations, and innovation, which are the ones that are important. And people felt that innovation and customer relationships are the most valuable assets, and they outsourced production to a small supplier. That is the Giant Manufacturing Corporation. Schwinn did not ask for a stake in the Giant, even as it handed over 4/5 of the bicycle production to the partner. 4/5, 80%. And the supplier gained knowledge and expertise, cut costs to become a better bike maker than its partner. And Giant is now one of the world's largest bicycle companies. So what happened here? Your partner basically has the intellectual property. He made some improvements as he is doing the manufacturing. It's a low-cost country, and the Schwinn lost its market share. So hollowing out. So orchestration can look very tempting and seductively easy. Let your partners do a lot of the hard work while you sit back and reap the rewards. Right? That is the one that orchestration should not be misunderstood as. But there is substantial risk lurking behind this. Unused internal capabilities can quickly atrophy. If you don't use our capabilities, you may lose them. And collaborators facilitating the process can get in the way. Partners may unexpectedly become competitors. So, when you are trying to manage something, then there are other people who want to get big also, and there is competition everywhere. It is not unfair. It is a fair competition, but like you, everybody wants to make money. So you have to be careful when you just want to orchestrate. So what is the solution? In other words, we have been talking in these 2 lectures that orchestration is a good thing that is happening, and you can orchestrate and so on and all that. But if you look at the examples, several examples, there are several types of orchestration we have talked about. And one kind of orchestration which is very highly risky is when you are a manufacturer, you outsource everything and try to manage. Then there is the risk of following it out. But if you are a service provider, for example, a Mandi, who is a service provider, who is connecting people, and it has a social purpose, then it could be an advantage. So, but in the case of somebody who is hauling it out, what is the solution? Governance model, get involved in orchestration. In other words, I was carefully defining what it means in orchestration. It means connecting. It means setting up performance standards. It means execution. It just not mean just give it everything to everybody and then you sit back and relax. So you get involved in the orchestration. So basically people know you are asking people questions, so they know you are inside. Keep some production at home. Call it high end. A lot of manufacturers are doing this, particularly in the fashion business, where they keep some production at home, but they call it high end. And rather run it as a joint venture. When you have a joint venture, then you have your own people in that, and you have a stake in it. Whether it is in foreign or whether it is in your own country, in some other country. Keep innovating and make the outsource model outdated and look for a new partner. So it's not the strong ties kind of thing where you keep innovating and make the outsource model outdated, and that means your partner, whoever is doing things for you, is outdated, but you are looking now for a new partner. The need for network orchestration can be seen most clearly in the failures of offshoring, outsourcing, and strategic alliances. So one thing that follows here, we should understand that the orchestration, we have projected it as a governance model for a dispersed manufacturer. In other words, for a social network. of organizations which are globally dispersed. So you are looking at orchestration as a governance model which basically connects all of them and puts them together towards a common goal. That's what it is. But if you are basically a company and you want to outsource everything and then try to manage, that's a misunderstanding of network organization, in which case you may get into the problems of the risk. So what is the conclusion? What is that we have done in these 2 lectures? We have looked at orchestration as one of the governance models. So in these governance models, we looked at the orchestration, defined it, what are the talents that are required, what does orchestration means, and we looked at several examples. And in particular, in logistics, in supply chain, as a Mandi, as a print supply chain, which are small enterprises, how orchestration can really help. So in the examples I have given, like the print supply chain or an agriculture Mandi or logistics, you are basically a new player connecting with others. But there are examples like the hollowing out example of a manufacturer who outsources everything and he wants to just manage, then there could be some risk. So people should see what they are in and then implement orchestration, understand it properly. The value of orchestration in manufacturing service comes from integration, bridging borders as well as leveraging companies' connections and knowledge across the network. That's the important point. Modeling and analysis are in early stages. What I have presented here is all is heuristics or kind of qualitative presentations of principles here, which are important. Capability to connect competencies. Core competency of network orchestration is an important for specific capabilities. So in other words, a firm has capabilities. You are very good in design. You are good in manufacturing. You are good in some services and so on. But like that, you are good in connecting to good people. That's also as good an important thing. And cloud, big data and other technological advantages will fuel orchestration as a popular model of governance. In the future, the current things is that you have to communicate with your partners. How do you communicate? It's now cloud computing and also big data analysis and the machine learning algorithms. They basically come into in a big way. Orchestration by NGOs and foundations to ensure food security, health, affordable housing, and skill-based education would benefit poorer sections of the population. So this orchestration can be used for social purposes, where you have, for example, health. You can collect all the hospitals, the doctors, and the patients, and the security, food security. For example, you can connect all the players like the hawkers and the NGOs and the others do this, and affordable housing and others. So basically, that's where we stop, and we'll look at some more things on orchestration in the next class. Thank you.